Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Denise, and with me to present, of course, is QAD and MRP expert Don Lindsey. Also with us today is Olena, our sensational solutions architect, and Christian, who is our superlative software engineer, among the million other things they both do. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and as we move along to the presentation, here is just some of the experience instructor extraordinaire Don Lindsey brings.
Good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are. And thank you, Denise, for that nice introduction. Last month, we talked about the sales and operation planning functionality in QAD. So I thought this month we would continue with the multi theme and talk about some more functionality about QAD's multi-functional ERP, and that is this function called the Enterprise Material Transfer, EMT process. EMT empowers the movement of product and information between sites, domains, and entities. EMT is a fully functional, robust set of tools built to deal with modern supply chains. Some of the subjects we'd like to cover today, including EMT, are the definition. We always want to talk about terminology, discuss some of the scenarios, talk about setup, cover the system and how it flows with sales orders, purchase orders, etc. Then some ancillary subjects like direct allocations, material orders, tracking. We'll talk about multi-level, and then just a word about EMT and enterprise with EDI. And so how would we define enterprise material transfer? Enterprise Material Transfer is a set of functionalities that enable the translation of sales orders into purchase orders automatically, and the transmission of those purchase orders electronically to other sites or facilities, sometimes using QAD's eCommerce module. EMT utilizes discrete and sales orders and purchase orders. These sales orders and purchase orders are linked in the EMT setup. It doesn't interfere with MRP. You can use EDI, like I mentioned, if you want to. So it uses the standard QAD functionality of standard sales orders, invoicing, accounts receivable, purchase orders, accounts payable, taxes, and INTRASTAT. The primary features of EMT are, as we had mentioned, EMT automatically generates purchase orders from sales orders. It can do this through the eCommerce module. Purchase orders can be imported then into what is referred to as an SBU, or a manufacturing facility, to create sales orders instead of emailing and all that to buyer and customer services. When an EMT purchase order is modified, the changes can automatically be transmitted back to the source unit, and EMT supports two types of delivery modes, what are called direct shipments and TRANSSHIPMENTS. So why should we be using EMT? Well, EMT is very helpful when suppliers are frequently other divisions of the same company, or suppliers in another company with a well predefined stable relationship. You can reduce inventory with EMT. It leads to the consolidation of warehouses. Logistic efficiency is increased through this direct delivery mode. EMT can reduce order lead time. It gets rid of non-value added activities, and it can provide customers with a seamless interface to suppliers. So why don't we use EMT? Well, people are just not aware of the functionality. That's why we're here today. EDI e-commerce setup and maintenance can be costly and complex, but you can use EMT without EDI if needed. Data interchange logistics, the maintenance of transactions can be complex, especially if you get a multi-tier or a multi-level supply chain, especially with 3PL involved. Error handling can be complex and time-consuming. IT resources that are needed for EMT, EDI and e-commerce sometimes are costly and hard to find, and it requires a little additional training because users have to understand how it's set up. As with most new functionality, there's many new acronyms and words that we have to define and become familiar with. Probably the two most important significant concepts that one needs to understand is the term PBU, primary business unit, and SBU, secondary business unit. A primary business unit is responsible for processing customers' original purchase order, and a secondary business unit is responsible for maintaining a secondary sales order created from the primary business unit's purchase order and supplying the item. Another important concept in EDI is that we need to understand the difference between direct shipments and transshipments. For direct shipments, the primary business unit does not physically receive the merchandise. The secondary business unit ships directly to the end customer. For transshipments, the secondary business unit ships the merchandise to the primary business unit, and then the primary business unit either packages it with others or modifies it and then ships it to the end customer. EMT supports several different types of scenarios. EMT can be within a single database where the PBU and the SBU are within the same domain. You can have a single database where the SBU and PBU are in different domains. EMT can support across databases with the SBU and PBU in different domains. It can support the primary business unit in a domain and the secondary in a earlier release, non-domain. So lots of opportunities to utilize this EMT functionality. Some setup considerations, some assumptions. EMT doesn't allow cycle structures in this item supplier chain. If you hark back to our bill of material discussions we've had earlier, you can't have a parent component going into a parent. Direct allocations, we'll talk about a little bit more. You can't do that across more than one level in EMT. Credit only goes one level, and configurations of items must be the same at all levels in the EMT. Some exclusions that we need to be concerned with. Change management is only level by level, one level at a time. ASNs are transmitted throughout the business unit, even for direct shipments, and customer supplier schedules don't work with EMT. Some other considerations, dates. We talked about dates in March with dates in QAD, critical to the way that your ERP system is going to work. The original input are calculated during that original creation of the sales order. Various ways to determine the promise dates, and this depends on the shipping method for EMT. The SBU promise date equals the PBU due date. And if you modify orders, which we'll talk about a little bit later, it depends on the status of the order, but you can do mass changes in EDM. Some other considerations, I'm not an accountant, as with the tax and invoicing. However, I have had some experience with data management, 3PL, master data. Bottom line is they've got to be the same. The data in all databases, part numbers, designations, suppliers, customer numbers, all that has to be the same across the supply chain. We've talked about that before. Well, EMT is very robust when it's up and running, has many points of possible error or issues. The more complex you make your scenarios, the more difficult your error handling will be. While changes are allowed in EMT, it's suggested that you limit your process because changes just add to the confusion. EMT is quite flexible, so you can set it up. You need to think about your business process before you set it up. You can do it fully automated or partially automated, depending on how you might want to. So take some time up front to lay out your process flow, and this will definitely help your organization much time and money when you get the implementation. Some questions you're going to have to consider are you going to use direct shipments or transshipments? That's the biggie. Depends on causes or has different flows for those. Are you going to have a dedicated inventory site or location for EMT? Unique location probably might be a good idea. Do you want automatic EMT sales order confirmations? I'd be a little cautious with that until you're really familiar with the process. How are you going to handle supplier pricing? You use price lists, marks down, etc. If you use direct allocation, you need to understand how that works. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Are you going to do auto receipt on POs? And again, a little caution up front. And finally, how are you going to change or manage change orders? So here is the standard setup steps required for EMT. First of all, you're going to set up suppliers. Then we're going to talk about sites. We'll talk about how you set up customer profiles, item site combinations. We'll talk about our favorite 1.4 or 1.16 and 1.19. And then some purchasing and sales order control settings, and then finally a little discussion about trading partner records. So EMT setups required both the primary business unit and secondary business unit. Most of it takes place at the primary. It's a matter of considering the defaults. If you have multi-level, a little bit later, but we'll talk about that. So as we move on to the supplier in 2.3.1, there's the supplier maintenance, data maintenance, and the EMT transfer frame appears. Here you can set whether you're going to send SO prices to your secondary business units. Are you going to send credit holds? Here's that automatic transfer that we had talked about, the automatic processing, automatic purchase order, and then a sales order price reduction percentage, and are you going to use that percentage? The site setup, first of all, you've got what the default supplier is for this site, always can be overridden, and then with the external and direct allocation feature of EMT, you specify whether you're going to use an external supplier for that. EMT requires these site setups, but it also requires that these sites be company addresses so that you can use such features as direct shipments and direct allocations, and you use 2.12 company maintenance to do that. Simply creating a site in site maintenance doesn't create this record. Inventory control 1.1.1, the inventory control status, controls quantity on hand, how it's statused, and or restricted in inventory locations. So you might consider creating some new inventory status codes, not available, not nettable, not over issue, and restrict at least some ISS transactions. In 1.1.18, this is where you maintain inventory within a site to augment the process of EMT with regards to purchase orders on hand and shipment data. So you might consider your location setup. In 2.1.1, just like we saw in 2.3.1, there is an enterprise material transfer frame that pops up. First of all, you're going to define what kind of EMT type it is, whether it's direct ship or transship. You've got a customer lead time possibility, which is going to be taken in consideration with direct shipments. Are you going to confirm EMT SOs? And then how is the EMT credit flow going to work? And then in the customer data frame of 2.1.1, you also want to make sure that your ship via is properly defined. If you have customers that use foreign currency, you want to make sure that in 27.20.1.1 or 1.2 that your currency code is correctly set up. Then we get to our sales order control, and this is where we have most of the controls regarding EMT. You can see, first of all, you got to tell the system that you're going to use EMT. Here's the default EMT site type, whether it's direct ship, TRANSSHIP, or regular non-EMT order. You've got then the sequence of how the EMT sales orders determine what kind of sales order it is. Is it item site? Then it looks at item. Customer's sales order can be in any sequence that you feel comfortable with. And then you've got the automatic EMT processing, questionable. You can have the system calculate dates we're talking about. There's the direct allocation check. There's the direct shipment location if you want it. Then are you going to automatically accept supplier changes? What currency are you going to use? And then do you allow some modifications, whether on pick, work order, ship? And are you going to export credit holds? In 5.24, there's one field, require acknowledgement if the supplying site using EMT enters yes to require PO acknowledgement to be imported to the SBU before changes are allowed to the PBU's primary sales order. When you use 7.9.1.2, etc., you're going to have to set up the 7.9.24 container shipper control. These have to do with the number range management sequence ID, whether you're going to have a max, whether you're going to reallocate, and then there's a whole list of shipping label functionality that you're going to have to look for. If you use that 7.9.1 and 9.2, you're going to have to probably utilize the 36.2.21.1, the number range management. This allows you to assign schemas in a consistent and logical uniform manner for number ranges for several functions, shipping, general ledger, invoices, lot numbers, etc. So you need to become familiar with that process. In 1.16, customer item maintenance, we've talked about this before. This is where you set up the relationship between your part number and the customer's part number, so that when the customer's PO is exported to the SBU, that is going to print. Same thing with the 1.19 supplier item maintenance. This is where you make that relationship between your item and the supplier item. And there are two fields that relate to EMT, whether you're going to use the sales order price reduction for this item, a supplier, and what is that percentage that you're going to define. In 1.4.1 or 1.4.17 or 1.4.7, here you're going to set the default mnemonic for the EMT type against the item, either direct or TRANSSHIP, and then the question is whether you're going to automatically process through EMT this particular item. If you're using EDI or eCommerce process, and I hope you do, for EMT or multi-level EMT, you should establish the 3513.7 trading partner relationship for your items. So you can develop whatever schema you want for your trading partners, and then in the trading partner maintenance, first frame allows you to define a group. There's some counter processes that have to do with timing and real time. Whether you're going to suppress warnings, which you're going to stop on errors. Then within that 3513.7 trading partner and maintenance, you're going to find the trading partner document records, document ID, whether it's in or out, a document map, transmission group, and a token list can be defined. Then with the last frame of that 351310, this is the trading partner parameter maintenance. So lets you define the methods and sets of information that you will exchange with specific trading partners. Are you going to send ASNs, PO acknowledgments, planned ship schedules, POs? Are you going to load sales as confirmed? Are you going to send vouchers, etc.? So that's in the 35.13.10. Here is just a simple little matrix. You might use this in the future that gives you kind of a summary of what we've just been through for both the primary business unit and the secondary unit in terms of the setups that are required for these various supplier site, customer data, etc. information. So you can start using the EMT sales orders only after you have set up all the controls and master programs to establish the EMT functionality. Here on this side, we see a simple process for that. This is a little bit less complicated. Here's a simplified EDI flow in which we demonstrate 4 domains in Europe and a secondary business unit in the US. So the process would be that the customer is going to order, in this case from Germany. Germany is then going to create a sales order for that against the customer purchase order. They are going to then create a purchase order, which is automatically created to the US domain. That sales order then is going to be entered, and the US domain is going to procure or manufacture or what do they do to get the product. Then they're going to ship it on an SO shipment back to the German domain. The German domain is going to ship back on their sales order to the end customer. So you can see that it is a somewhat complicated process. Here's a little bit more elaborate view of that process. You got a primary business unit. They're going to import or create that 7.1.1. That is going to create the EMT PO. That is then going to be exported to the secondary business unit. They're going to import it. They will acknowledge back to the PBU that they, the secondary business unit, have acknowledged it. They're going to input and receive that acknowledgement. You've got change orders that can happen back and forth. We'll talk about that a little bit later. You can allocate and pick then at that secondary business unit. After they have done it, then the primary business unit will receive the purchase order changes associated with that. Then the secondary business unit can either do a transship or a direct ship. And if it's a transship, then the primary business unit would ultimately send that to the customer. So here is a little bit more. You can see that the customer is going to create a sales order or a purchase order against the sales order primary business unit. Then the primary is going to send a secondary, create a secondary PO and send a sales order to the secondary unit, or you can have as many secondary units as you need. Then the secondary is going to either direct ship, okay, and that is where the secondary business unit ships directly to the customer. They're going to invoice the primary, and the primary business unit would then generate the invoice. For a transshipment, the secondary business unit is going to ship back to the primary. Primary is then going to ship to the customer. Secondary invoices, and then finally the end customer gets invoiced. So that's the difference between the two, direct and transship. First step of the process is to create the sales order. So you can either create it with EDI input, or you can do it manually. The system identifies the EDI sales order and the type, depending on the customer, the item site, or the sales order control. And then the system automatically determines the default supplier for that item. And you can change that if you want on the sales order, or just take the default. And then you are going to create an automatic build of a purchase order, and then it queues that for transmission. Maintaining sales orders, a couple of words of caution. You can't add a line to a secondary EMT sales order at a secondary business unit. The only changes allowed at the level 2 business are either to supplier or EMT shipment type. Sales orders can be sales order lines can be deleted, but if you delete it, it's the effect of canceling the corresponding purchase order. The creation of the EMT purchase order, again, this is one of the primary reasons that we use EMT, is that when you cut the sales order, it automatically creates the purchase order. When the sales order is confirmed at the primary business unit, the system checks the control programs and master tables to determine what EDI processing is required. If it is an EDI order, the system calculates due dates and then creates the PO. In a very simple environment where you use EMT only to generate initial purchase orders, you can do everything manually. Just mail, fax, whatever you need to. Or you can use the 352213 EMT Commerce. The secondary business unit will then either input with the 352213 to create the MTPO. Once that's confirmed as a secondary sales order from the primary business purchase order, the secondary sends an acknowledgement back to the PBU. And we'll talk a little bit about these transmission status and how to track all of that process. If once the PO is in the SPO and they've supplied or made the inventory available, they're going to use the 7.9.1 or 7.9.2 to allocate and pick the inventory. This creates a change management record that is then exported back to the PBU as a PO acknowledgement, and the PBU imports that PO acknowledgement and shows it as an EMT PO status P. A couple of cautions. There's some restrictions when you have a configured item that has changed to a line status of W, and depending on how the sales control file is set up, the primary business unit may no longer make changes to its own sales order for item depending on what has taken place. Shipping from the inventory from the secondary business unit, again, you can either do a transshipment, and in that case, the secondary business unit ships back to the primary business unit, or for a direct shipment, the SBU creates a temporary ship to address for the PBU. It can utilize the 16.1 that we talked about, and when that process is complete, then you can invoice from the PBU. Receiving inventory at the primary business unit, again, based on trans or direct shipments. In both cases, the PBU creates 5.13.20, a PO shipper receipt to receive in the inventory. So on trans shipments, the primary business unit just goes ahead and receives as a regular. That basically ends the EMT cycle. And with direct shipments, then inventory is received at the customer and an ISSO transaction is completed. When you calculate dates in EMT, all date calculations are the same for either transshipment or direct shipment. Inspection lead time uses a shop calendar. Promise date calculations are only entered at the new sales order line. So if components in the promise date calculation change, you must delete and re-enter the sales order line. Customer shipping lead time, which we saw in previous, is going to add to your direct shipment lead time. And then again, there are no adjustments for past due. We talked about this extensively in our dates in QAD webinar in March. MRP, ERP doesn't like past due dates. There's no, if your EMT order is past due, your EMT purchase order is going to be past due. So don't allow past due in EMT. Here are some specific calculations that you can look at a little bit later for how those dates are calculated, both at the primary business unit and the secondary business unit. We've talked about direct allocations. Direct allocations in some supplier relationships, a business unit at one level in the supply chain is allowed to make a temporary allocation of inventory for an EMT order at a lower supplier site. EMT supports this if the SBU are located in the same domain. If the 7.1.24 direct allocation is yes, it only takes place across one level down. And when the EMT, PO, and SBU imports that secondary, it converts the preliminary allocation into a general allocation. If we remember from a couple of previous webinars, this is a little allegory that lets you look at the difference between general and detail allocation. If you're going to use that direct allocation, you really need to understand how QAD handles those direct allocations. EMT supports material orders. So if you use service and support module, material order can automatically generate a purchase order. If it's designated as an EMT order, you can do direct allocations. However, EMT can only process TRANSSHIPMENTS, not direct shipments for material orders. If you process ASNs, ASN is queued for receipt processing at a secondary business unit. The level 1 business unit is notified that the shipment is processed. For direct shipment, this triggers the shipment. For TRANSSHIPMENTS, the business unit at the next level up is notified of a pending, and they have to go through the 5.13.20. This status tracking is very, very helpful. The primary business unit maintains two forms of tracking data related to EMT, either a transmission status or a secondary business unit shipping status. With a transmission status, you can see this in the 7.15.11. For example, if the primary business unit imports the PO acknowledgement, the transmission changes from 2 to 3. So the action statuses that you can see in that 7.15.11 are when the purchase order is created, if the purchase order is pending receipt, the receipt of the purchase order acknowledged, whether it's awaiting a change acknowledgement from the primary business unit, or if a pending change to a EMT PO is waiting at the SBU. The shipment status, there's several programs that modify the status of the secondary sales order at the secondary business unit. Either an 813 configured order release, the 7.9.1, 7.9.2, and the 7.9.5 obviously change the status of those shipment statuses. And so you can see that the status could be blank, but there's no changes. If it's a double U, that's a configured items released to a work order. P at the secondary business says that the inventory has been allocated and picked, and if it's an S, the secondary business unit has shipped that item. So very helpful information on that. We've looked at the standard 2-level EMT, but you can also have multi-level, depending on how complex your supply chain is. Standard EMT involves only 2, but in QAD, multi-level is available. It's usually defined at 3 levels. You can have more, but level 1 is the primary business unit standard process we've been talking about. Level 2, mid-level organizations between level 1 business that recorded the original demand, and the final supplier, which provides the fulfillment of that demand. The level 2 hierarchy can be any number of business units. Standard EMT at level 2 acts as a primary of the business relationship and SPO to others. And then the level 3 is the lowest level, which the supplier supplies the original demand, which is the equivalent that we looked at in the standard. Couple of restrictions for multi-level. Level 2, business change must accept changes from both above and below. You cannot modify the quantity or due date. However, you can change the supplier or the EMT. Some other restrictions, only works in a multi-level environment. You have to use EDI. Lots of reports to give you that visibility. Credit flows only one level down. Same configurations if you're going to use configured items across the supply chain. Change management level by level. ASNs can't be processed from level 3 directly to an end customer. And if there's an error, the originator of the purchase order must reopen the PO and re-import that process. Some considerations: if you're going to use automatic, you need well-defined business relationships. You can use manual, especially when you vary order for order. You can do automatic, manual, any combination you want, and it depends on the settings in those 4 key elements of automatic processing in 1.4.1, 1.4.17, 2.3.1, and 7.1.24. INTRASTAT. INTRASTAT features in QAD supports regulatory agencies' reporting requirements for tracking business transactions involved with companies in the EDU. So the question is, who reports those processes? So if it's a dispatch, when the SBU and the PBU are in the same country, the PBU is responsible for reporting. If different countries, the SBU is responsible. And for arrivals, basically the same thing. If the PBU and end customer is the same country, PBU is responsible. Whereas if they're different countries, the end customer is responsible for that reporting. Modifying orders. You can modify EMT orders within the system. There are some restrictions on that. 3 factors are which business unit is going to affect the change, the status of the order within that EMT process, and then the status of those add modify fields that we saw in 7.1.24. Change orders. Once the sales order is created, any changes made to it create basically a change record. These pending changes notify the system so that if a sales order can be modified or not, depending on whether you've got a current pending change for that PO, changes are made immediately, but it does have a rollback process so that if it doesn't process, it goes back to the original. Just a quick word on EMT. EDI and can be augmented by these transactions in your 35.22.13. It's optional for standard EDI, but it's required if you're going to use multi-level. It supports the 850s purchase order change, 855, and the 856. You can use this eCommerce manager to automate document processing if you need to. When you use the 35.22.13, those transactions or those document types that we created in the trading partner are maintained in the TRQ master record. You can send all of those at once, or if you want, you can individually send 35.49, 45, 22.16, 2015, and ASNs through the 4.1. In the 35.2.13 eCommerce, if you set that import file checkbox to yes, it's going to import and export based on either polling, hours of polling, whether you want to export ASNs, POs, acknowledgments, etc. And then to set up the EDI to support your e-commerce, you're going to have to define the e-commerce subsystems, exchange file definitions, cross-reference, some application document definitions, implementation, and transformation. In addition, you're going to need, as we talked about, the 3513, the 3513.7 trading partner maintenance, and then the trading partner parameter maintenance. Just a quick review of the menus represented by the e-commerce and tables. First, we've got the 35.4. These menus define the various EDI elements of QAD and how to transmit them. 35.9 allows for the function of importing, exporting, and processing. 35.11 allows you to set up a user's domain with an EDI domain. 35.13 sets various system, subsystem, trading partner, validation functions. 35.15 defines exchange and implementation sets, applications, transformations. 35.17 defines some utilities for copying, import, export. Then the 35.21, here's your number range management for e-commerce that we talked about a little bit before. The 35.22 deals with the specific transactions of EDI as they relate to the e-commerce and EMT processing. So today's supply chain needs to be able to efficiently move product throughout the network of customers, manufacturers, and suppliers. This is becoming more and more important. I saw a bit on TikTok the other day that talked about the complexity of the modern supply chain. The worldwide supply chain consists of billions of individuals, 7.6 at the point, connected by over 400 million internet sites, with 56,000 cargo ships, 27,000 air cargo planes, and over 15.5 million delivery trucks. Can you imagine the number of nodes and network connections that is? Many trillions. As we all remember, what happened when something goes amiss with this network, hark back to the incident with the Suez Canal and the Ever Given. This is an excellent example of the need for supply chain visibility and control. EMT, material transfer, provides that needed functionality in your QAD ERP system to process thousands, if not potentially hundreds of thousands of intercompany and external supplier transactions through your supply chain network. The setup and statement for the use of EMT transfers requires discipline, detail, consistency for data correctness. We've talked in most of our webinars about the need for data accuracy and business process consistency. EMT affords some of these functions for your supply chain. If you want to learn more about EMT, it's not an easy concept. It takes a lot of concentrated, dedicated people, robust network equipment, defined business processes. Here's several resources that are available. I hope you all had the chance to look at Greg Weinhardt's demonstration from the spring mug presentation on the new QAD support site. There you can look at the knowledge base, forums, document. There also is Logan and Thirdware have some great functionality, and the number one rule for any learning experience is you got to read the user guide. In this case, the Enterprise Material Transfer User Guide. As we've said, 32Soft has spent 20 years developing ways to get data in and out of QAD, from workbenches to Production Planner to Production Planner Plus to the standard 32Soft data loaders. These tools assist in the operation of your QAD system. As we've said before, it takes a lot of information to run a modern system. So here you can get the 32Soft loaders, easy installation, 60-day trial, works with cloud, EE and SE, and 32Soft also has what they call the 32Soft InterCompany Transaction Workbench. This not only works with and enhances the QAD Enterprise Material Transfer System module, but also works even if you don't use EMT and QAD. This allows for regular processing of POs in addition to EMT POs, simple user interface based on Excel, provides immediate real-time order status across databases and domains, executes error-proof EMT intercompany orders, and eliminates confusion, double entry, costing. Great. If you'd like a demo, please give us a call. We hope you've enjoyed this short review of some of the functionality that might assist you with your use of control of interactions with your customers and suppliers inside and outside of your QAD database. We wish you the best for the remainder of 2021. Looks like we've made it halfway through. As a reminder, MUG, WUG, and SUG are all having their in-person conferences in the fall. How exciting. I can't wait. I get to go to both MUG and WUG to make presentations. So please come out and support your user group. If you have any questions after we finish the webinar, please send Denise or myself a quick email and we'll get back with you as soon as possible.
Real quick, since we did not build in time, I just wanted to ask if anyone has any interest in seeing the EMT Workbench in action. And if you could just click on yes or no, that'll give us a sense of whether we should have possibly included a live demo today. So, okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody. And we will, as mentioned, move right into the Q&A. But
just a quick statement. I have had the opportunity to watch Olena do a demo of the 32Soft EMT Workbench, and it's pretty amazing to see exactly what that does. So yeah. I'd highly recommend that anybody have that opportunity.
Okay. And I think we have an older recording of the demo, so maybe I can include that for everybody when I send out the Encore email. I'll link to that. I will do that. Yeah. So we'll move forward for now. Still no questions. Training, yes, we train and we do get a lot of questions about training. So whether attrition or if you have the need for process consistency or improvement, we're happy to help with whatever your training needs may be. I've not updated these stats in a bit, but we have had more than 665 trainees among more than 23 custom sessions. So again, let us know and we can get the training conversation started if you need any help. Okay. Oh, look, it switched on me nicely. In July, upcoming events, we do have Simplify with QAD's production orders, which is followed in August by Simple PCO PCC Management. And as Don mentioned, in-person user group conferences are back. We have the Midwest User Group. They announced their fall conference and date, and though not on my slide, the West Coast User Group has announced their live conference will follow in October. I don't have the Southeast User Group dates or announcement, but Don, you said they did announce theirs as well, right?
Yes, they did.
So, okay, so all three. And I do want to note that Don's conference sessions consistently rank among the most popular, and they are very often the most popular. I know at the virtual session, the only one who had a higher level of attendees was the keynote speaker. So we have, again, had to push what was to be our September webinar, Balancing Inventory and Customer Need with DRP. And due to the conflict with the fall conferences, we do plan to move the DRP webinar from September to November, but we will send out more on that. We're always reluctant, please note, to change our dates once set, but until we figure out how to get done in two places simultaneously, that's
or stop COVID, one of the two, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, the benefits. We know the benefits of EMT include automation, integration, consolidation, and of course, efficiency results from all of that and more. So this quote, I kind of rather like the analogy of it, and by Van Gogh of all people. Great things are done by a series of small things brought together. That's not meant to imply that those pieces that are being automated, integrated, or consolidated are small by any means, but bringing them together is likely to produce a great thing. Did we cover everything, Don?
I believe so. Thank you again so much for your attendance. In July, I'm going to try and cover some of the new functionality in the newer versions of QAD related to production orders, which have now replaced the old work orders. So look forward to seeing a lot of you in July. So that's it.
For that, thank you all for your patience and your time today, Elena, Christian, Don, and a special thanks to my right hand, Kathy, who is here very quiet today, but she jumped on early so I could kind of work out some of the bigger kinks that you didn't have to see. So everybody have a great day. And from all of us at 32 Soft, thank you again, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, guys.